This is a Flying Cow production.
There was a man named Worrell, Ernest P. Worrell, that celebrates his cat.
Well, hello and welcome back to Around the Worrell, our Patreon exclusive podcast talking all things Ernest P. Worrell. I am, of course, your host, the Flying Cow himself, Clay Johnson. And here with me today is, as always, my co-host, the litigator, Loren Collins. Loren, how are you today, sir?
Doing good, Clay. How are you doing today?
Good. As anyone who's watching the video can tell, we are using a different setup than we typically do. We used to record all of these on Zoom. I am now trying my hand at StreamYards, so we're going to see how this goes. Telling Loren beforehand, I'm like, I'm not sure where this recording is going to go. We're going to have to figure this out. But yeah, other than that, I'm doing good. How are you, sir?
Doing okay. Got, like I was saying before we started recording, started rehearsals for a new show last night. Looking forward to that, but looking forward to talking movies here today.
Absolutely. It is great to be back here talking all things Ernest P. Worrell, as I said. And today we are discussing one of actually the final Ernest film to be released, to be distributed under the Touchstone label for Disney. That is Ernest Scared Stupid, which came out, I believe, in 1991.
I think that is right. Yes.
Yeah, and it was, of course, directed by John R. Cherry. And let's see, I'm trying to find the music. Music by Bruce Arntzen, understandably, and Kirby Shellstad,
I think.
Okay, here I couldn't tell if it was an I or an L.
Yeah.
But yeah, Kirby Shellstad. Kirby Shellstad, was he part of the team that did the music for Ernest Goes to Camp? Because I know that was like a husband and wife team.
I don't recognize the name.
Okay.
Yeah. I was going to say too that this appears to be, in addition to being the last Touchstone Ernest film, it was
Right.
of course, the last Ernest film to pull any kind of profit at the box office.
Yeah. Well, it was the last one. With a full release in theaters.
Yes.
The next Ernest Rides Again had a very short run. Like we're talking. I saw it on the marquee at the theater one day, went back and saw the marquee the next day, and it was not there.
Yeah,
I think it had a weekend run.
Yeah, this had this technically made a profit at the box office, after expenses. Who knows if it did or not? But I think
right.
From here on out, Ernest Rides Again is a bona fide just bomb.
Sure. And then the rest of them were all direct to video, DVD or whatever.
Kirby Shellstad did some music sequencing for the Hey Vern, It's Ernest television show.
Okay.
And then was a composer for 4 consecutive films, starting with Jail. Ernest Goes to Jail, then Ernest Scared Stupid, Rides Again, and Ernest Goes to School.
That's right. Okay, so he did the music. I'm assuming, obviously, Bruce Arntzen did all the songs in Ernest Goes to Jail.
Yeah.
There weren't really songs in this one. It was
really.
mostly just your typical background music.
Yeah, background soundtrack music. Yeah.
Right. So I am a little curious as to what exactly.
I suppose there is some kind of tune that plays over the opening credits. The sort of Halloween-ish music that plays over that and the horror.
Right.
Clips.
Right.
That's about the closest thing this has to a song. But again,
there's the that kind of stuff. But I mean, that's not real. I mean, unless it was just Bruce Arntzen performed. I mean, I assumed that might have been well, I don't know. Maybe it
Who knows?
was
Yeah.
somebody else. But yeah, so as you mentioned, this had a budget of 9.6 million, and unfortunately it only made 14.1. So this is definitely the lowest performing Ernest film to this point.
Yes.
Um,
That was down
and-
from 25 million for Ernest Goes to Jail, 28 million for Ernest Saves Christmas.
yeah. Yeah. So it had been steadily declining, but this was quite a jump.
Yeah.
In its decline. And
And
so
this
yeah,
is still back
go
in the
ahead.
day, where VHS tapes, could be sold. It's got to make something on the secondary market, but
Right. And
it's iffy. Yeah.
sure. And I'm pretty sure we owned the VHS for this.
You may have two, actually.
But I do want to ask, I think you've kind of mentioned it before. Like, when do you remember first seeing this movie? Like, what was your relationship to this film specifically?
I don't have a specific memory of seeing it in theaters, but I'm relatively certain I did.
Okay.
Also fairly certain we must have had this on either, I don't know, if we taped it off television or if we had the VHS, or
Sure.
however we might have seen it, watched it on TBS for all I know.
Right.
But honestly, more than the other movies, even so, there are bits of dialogue and scenes in this that stick in my memory.
Right.
Like where'd he go, Rimshot? Where'd he go? For whatever reason, that's a line I'm sure me and my siblings could all remember now.
Yeah.
But it's fairly incidental in this film. It just goes to show how many times we must have watched this.
Oh yeah, no. I rewatching this last night, I remember being like, that is like a nothing line, but I remember that. Like the part in the film when they're first going into the spooky woods, and the lead kid Kenny is behind everyone, and he's like, "Go on, go on," and I was like, I have such a strong memory of that. And he's literally just saying, go on, go on. That's all it is. But yeah.
I can remember Barney's inflection on "Yea, I call thee forth, Trantor."
Yeah.
Also, I guarantee you, my sibs and I, if I asked them, either one of them would remember Miak. We all remember Authentic Bulgarian
Bulgarian Miak.
As it was coming up to that scene, I was I backed it up just to make sure. It's like it is what I remember. I remember it as Authentic Bulgarian Miak for the last 30 years, and yes, that is exactly the phrase that comes out of his mouth.
Yeah, no, I absolutely. I will say I did not see this in theaters. Like I said, the only one I actually remember seeing in theaters is Ernest Goes to Jail. And I think part of that is that the driving force for these films would have been my father. I mean, obviously myself as well, but I didn't necessarily always know when things were in theaters. Like I knew when they were being advertised on television, but I didn't actually always know when they were actually, dates and stuff like that were a little nebulous. But like I said, the main person who would have paid and taken you to the theater would have been my father at that time. But my dad wasn't really like a go to the theater person. Like he definitely went here and there, but it wasn't like, my dad was very much a homebody, very similar to myself, honestly. And if he didn't have to go somewhere, if he was like, we'll get it on video later, well, just wait. He's fine with that. And my mother, she watched these things with us, but I don't think that it was ever like her favorite. So yeah, I think that's probably why I never saw it in the theater, but I am pretty certain that we had both this and Jail on home video. I think we had Goes to Camp. The only one I'm pretty sure that we Oh, I don't know. Maybe we did. I think later on we had Ernest Saves Christmas, but for the longest time, I think we didn't have that one, which is weird. But yeah, I think we had most of those 4 on VHS, and I watched them constantly. As you said, I have distinct memories of specific things in this film, just because I watched it so many times. But, just to kind of give everyone a cursory overview of the film, Ernest Scared Stupid basically follows Ernest. We are once again at a different point in the Ernest multiverse, the Worrelliverse, or whatever we're calling it. And at here, Ernest has a job as a garbage man for Briarville, Missouri, is where the story takes place. And we are introduced to the idea that in the late 19th century, one of Ernest's relatives basically they encounter a troll and they trap him. And Ernest's relative, who I believe is the
Reverend
priest?
Phineas Worrell.
Yeah, okay, yeah, a reverend. Yeah, I was like, I know he's a religious figure of some kind, but I couldn't remember the exact. So yeah, Reverend Phineas Worrell basically traps this troll. They build a tree over it. It's going to keep him confined. And basically the troll curses him and says, not only am I going to get loose, but it's going to be one of your ancestors that's going. Yes, ancestors comes before, descendants after. Yes, one of your descendants is going to free me. And so basically we have a curse set up. We encounter a woman who's somehow still alive from when this happened.
I'm coming on that in a second.
Oh yeah, we're gonna flesh all of that out in a second. But who recounts the curse? Ernest not accidentally, he's an idiot. Intentionally accidentally lets the troll out. And then the troll wreaks havoc in town, trying to gather the souls of 5 children to build a troll army. And of course, Ernest and the other kids that he encounters are trying to stop the troll. Trantor is his name. But yeah, that's the general plot going on. And I do, since we are kind of in an overview, I do just want to kind of mention, this isn't really something I noticed as a kid, but the story here is really sloppy.
Yeah.
It's just, and I just, in my head, I remember it going from point A to point B, boom, 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 boom. Mm-hmm. And it's really kind of a mess. It's a little all over the place. I mean, obviously, we mentioned in the last film, there was kind of a sequence of events, but it was a little bit looser than it had been in some of the previous films. A little bit goofier, a little bit sillier. Mm-hmm. And in this one, they are continuing kind of to be, like I said, have less structure and be even sillier.
Yeah.
To the point where I was like, okay, so obviously, like I said, we get a title sequence that is, some, I would say creepy, but, creepy, like in a silly, fun way. Bum, 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 bum. It honestly sounds like the theme of the Munsters, kind of thing. It's
Yeah,
it's
I
that
kinda
kind
like
of like bum, 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 ba, bum, bum, ba, ba. It's meant to like sound ominous, but in a fun way.
Yeah.
And over it, they are playing clips of there's mixes of some classic, there's clips of
Oh, yeah.
Nosferatu in this.
Yes.
So classic horror mixed with like some B 50s horror
Oh, yeah.
that
Uh,
is like, and
The
like,
what is this? The brain from Planet Arouse, the Screaming Skull. I've heard of the Screaming Skull.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And honestly, like when I see that and then I see what they're doing, I'm like, they're really not even trying to make a slick design here. They are really kind of trying to do a 90s version of a 50s B horror
B-movie.
movie. Yeah, exactly. And I think if you tackle it from that vantage point, I think it's actually fun.
Yeah.
Would I like it to be a little bit more cohesive and have a better idea of what it's doing? Sure. But, I do think that, obviously, like I said, they've got a $9 million budget. That's not a whole lot of money, even at that time, to be working with. So, they are kind of intentionally going for that type of feel. And I think that's a good idea. I just wish it was just a little bit more cohesive.
The thing that I noted as the film went on was that despite the fact that the Trantor is the central villain of this piece, that the
Right.
mythology surrounding Trantor is just
It-
really complex and keeps getting more complex as the film goes on. Like there keep being like new levels just to drive the plot.
Right. I mean, because they establish that they've got this book on and the mere fact that we are introduced to this whole story and then we are made to understand that this is a report that a girl is doing from the 1900s that is treated. I mean, a lot of the people in the town now are like, oh no, that didn't really happen. But it's treated as historical, but it's a story about a troll.
Sure, but I mean, at the same time, like, have you ever seen Waiting for Guffman?
Yes.
Like, yeah, like Waiting for Guffman, like it's accepted in town lore that like there was a UFO that came to town. Like that's
Sure,
it's,
but
it's small town schlock.
I will say though, that's different
Yeah.
than a UFO came to town and we had tea with the aliens.
Yes.
It's not just, oh, somebody thought they saw a troll. No,
Yeah.
we interacted with this troll. He actually abducted several children. I mean,
Children.
and I don't know. Maybe on the scale of things.
Yeah.
Because a film that this actually is very similar to in a lot of ways is Hocus Pocus.
I was going to say the same thing. Yes, exactly.
I mean, I will say I'm not the hugest fan of Hocus Pocus. I didn't come to it until I was actually in my 20s.
Yes.
Or actually maybe in my 30s.
Well, I definitely saw it when it came out.
Oh, sure. I didn't see it till way, I was raised in a religious household, witches, the evil, silly. But just seeing that and thinking about this, I remember thinking, did they steal that story from Ernest Scared Stupid?
Yeah, literally the fourth line of my notes here is Hocus Pocus vibes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, because that came out 2 years after this.
Yeah.
Because
Exactly.
this, like we said, came out in 91. That came out in 93.
Yep.
So,
But yeah, a lot of the backstory of the of like small town with the
sure.
supernatural secret what the monsters abducting or killing kids.
And by the way,
someone
I'm pretty
revives this
sure
monster by means of a ritual. The monster comes back, starts resuming its mission again. The kids have
Right.
to defeat it via new ritual.
Right. Yeah, because I think they also needed a certain number of children.
Something like that. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, the similarities are very, very interesting. But I will say, and I'm pretty sure that one was also released under the Touchstone label.
It probably was.
Yeah, I mean, witches.
It's all, yeah. It's just Disney in the '90s. It's a live action family film.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
But I will say that story is also a little all over the place, but I do think that it is just a little bit more cohesive.
Oh yeah.
Comparatively than this one, because as you said, we're introduced to the troll lore book at a certain point, and we get like some things, and then randomly Ernest discovers there's a missing page, which in some things it's like, ooh, that's a twist, but like you said, it really sometimes does feel like they're just adding lore to kind of make the story interesting and make it work.
No, what Hocus Pocus clearly has that gives it nostalgia value is the Sanderson sisters, and this movie has Trantor.
Which I will say, I really like the creature designs that they have here.
Actually, that's one of the stronger parts of the film. The creature designs are perfectly solid. I mean, other than the fact they can't really move their mouths all that much, they're otherwise perfectly solid.
What I will say, the lips on Trantor actually move quite a bit.
His do. I was thinking of the other ones, but yeah, the other ones barely move.
Oh, well,
Trantor's moves okay.
The other ones really don't talk. They just make mouse noises. Yeah, I mean they're also technically his children. But yeah, with Trantor, actually, the one big flaw I would say is that his mouth doesn't open.
Yeah.
I mean, there are occasions where the teeth kind of, separate a little bit. Yeah. But you can tell like that was kind of their issue. But the look, and there's movement in the ears and the lips and the eyes, that stuff, in my opinion, is solid and looks really good. The creature design here is
a good creature design. He's perfectly well made for this film.
Agreed.
He doesn't have much of a personality, but doesn't really need one, I suppose. But
no,
he's not an interesting antagonist.
Honestly, I will say at a certain point, because we are introduced to the idea of Trantor, and that he has this goal that he is going to create a troll army to control or destroy the world.
Control. Nice. Control.
Yeah. But so he has to get the souls of 5 children. And every time he gets a child, basically he touches them, they turn into a wooden doll, and then they shrink. Because we see a couple of times that he touches them, they turn into wood, and they're like, giant wooden figures, and then
full-size wooden figures. Then the camera cuts away, and it cuts back, and they're small. Yeah,
right, and then they cut away, and like you said,
one of the bits I remembered from this as a kid, incidentally, was that first kid who gets transformed. He's like fallen into the creek bed, and then the girl's in her voice. And then he looks up, and it's a monster. It's a good, scary.
That one, he actually uses Ernest's voice.
I'm sorry, you're right. He does use Ernest's voice for that one. But
that is, remind me. I want to come back to that because I have a question about that. But what I was wanting to say before is, he's after these kids, and it's dealt. The whole film is a little silly, but there are times that it's a little tense.
Yeah.
Like when he's chasing Kenny and all this kind of stuff. In fact, I wrote down, this kind of feels like the equivalent of a slasher for kids.
Yeah. That's a good comparison.
It really has those vibes, because there are times that it's like very creepy and you don't know, is the troll really there? Is it not? And then there are times that the troll is outright chasing a child.
Yeah.
So yeah, it definitely has those connotations. But like I
you
said,
also get certain shots in this film that are POV from Trantor, like it's a Friday the 13th film, like from Jason's POV.
Right. But what I was saying, like you had said, one of the guises that Trantor employs is that he can mimic other voices. And like you said, when he gets the first child, Joey, who we briefly spend some time with, but very briefly, he uses the voice of Ernest. And when he was very first released, the very first person he encountered was Ernest. Then after that, a lot of time, I think the only other time we hear him imitating a voice, it is the voice of the young girl, Elizabeth, specifically for Kenny. But that only happens after he has already captured Elizabeth. So I'm like, is he recording, I guess, learning, absorbing the voices as he encounters these people? Because he's only mimicking Ernest after he encounters Ernest. I'm guessing that he wouldn't be able to mimic anyone. I mean, how could you? But he can't mimic those of those he hasn't encountered.
He needs to have heard someone's voice before he can imitate it. Yeah,
right.
Just call someone up and imitate their parents if he hasn't heard their parents, for instance.
Right. Well, and because then after that, he does imitate Elizabeth to Kenny specifically.
Yes,
but several times after that, I wonder, and we're probably thinking more about this than the writers.
The
even
mechanics of Trantor's abilities, yes.
But I'm wondering, could he then also still mimic Ernest, or can he only mimic one at a time? Is it like,
Oh, is it like Ultra Boy, where he only have like one power at a time?
Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, the Trantor's normal voice. When I looked at the IMDb page or Wikipedia, like only a couple of names in this, the actors in this production were linked, like had their own. One of it was the girl who played Elizabeth. She went on to do some other stuff. She was
Shay Astor. I remember her specifically from an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Oh yes, it mentioned she did that,
where she played an imaginary friend, but creepy.
Oh,
a creepy imaginary friend.
Yeah. No, she did that episode. She did an episode of Quantum Leap that I know I've seen. I just don't remember her from it. But she was a supporting cast member of Third Rock from the Sun for a couple of seasons. She was
right.
Tommy's girlfriend.
Tommy's girlfriend. Yeah.
One of the names listed that's linked to, who's more prominent from this film, is the voice of Trantor, like the regular voice of Trantor, who is Ernie Fosselius.
Right.
Because what he did that was notable, I thought this was fun, was he has a background in like some animation. He did a bunch of early Sesame Street animations in the early years of Sesame Street, including I couldn't find other examples, but at the very least, he worked on the pinball animated segment from Sesame. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
Oh yeah. I distinctly remember that. Saw it hundreds of times.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That was co-created by the voice of Trantor.
Nice. Nice. Yeah. It also lists that the physical performer inside Trantor was Jonas Moscartolo.
Okay.
But yeah. Like I said, Trantor, doesn't have a lot of character. I don't think he's meant to.
He doesn't need to. Again, it's a B movie. He's a monster. That's what his job is.
He's a troll who's after children. That's all we need to know about. And he's bad.
Okay.
Well,
no, I brought that comparison mainly because I think that is the driving difference as to why Hocus Pocus has nostalgia value, and this didn't do the same thing, because people love the Sanderson sisters.
Sure. Well, but also that really, like, if you watch that film, I mean, one of my biggest issues with Hocus Pocus is that it's far too concerned with whether or not a 15-year-old boy has had sex.
Yeah.
It's obsessed with it, honestly, and I'm just like, this is weird.
Yes.
Can we stop talking about this?
Yes, in defense of Ernest Scared Stupid, it never mentions the virginity status of any of these kids. Like,
Which is good, because they're all like in grade school or middle school.
yes,
So
well, any characters in the film at all. Like, you assume the parents have, but other than that.
Yeah.
But no, what I was saying about like
go ahead.
the mythology of Trantor, like how it keeps evolving as the film goes over, like as a sort of a plot engine to keep it going. And in my opinion, like they didn't think it through at the beginning of the film. Trantor gets, clearly they've defeated Trantor, with Phineas Worrell and the other, members of Briarville, toss him in the hole, and Trantor.
But they only capture and bind him. They don't actually dispel him, right?
They don't, because the kids aren't transformed back. They've captured, they bound him, and Trantor says that your descendant will free me one day. All right, and you think that's what happens when Ernest like hammers something into the tree, and like it shows underneath. Then we, after they build Ernest and the kids, build a tree fort in the tree.
That is the coolest treehouse.
It is a cool.
When I was a kid, I was like, I wish. I mean, I didn't even have a treehouse as a kid.
Yeah,
but I was just like, man, that would be like the coolest treehouse.
But we didn't have a treehouse growing up. I should send you pictures of the one my brother has built for my nieces. It is like it's built to code by and large.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
It's nice. They can sleep out there. It has 2 levels. It's like you can have without to it temporarily. Like it's nice.
Sure.
He got special order windows in some cases for it.
Nice.
But no,
yeah, I would say that like this treehouse in this film is like in the upper echelon of movie treehouses.
Yes. It's a nice set piece for the end of the film too, other than looking conspicuous like it's on a set. But forgive that. But no, like when Ernest damages the tree, based on the previous prophecy, you think this is what frees Trantor. But then Eartha Kitt shows up. Ernest goes off to talk to her. Weirdly, we don't see that conversation. Ernest just comes back and repeats it.
Right.
And then it turns out like, no, there actually is more to that prophecy. Like Ernest has to do special steps to release Trantor. That was not part of Trantor's curse. We saw that seed earlier in the film. Trantor was the one who imposes the curse.
Well, but he's not specific about how he will. He simply says, one of your bloodline will release me.
Yes.
So I imagine that, however he.
But then there shouldn't really be
it's probably the same.
There shouldn't be specific rules for like what day it has to happen on and what words have to be spoken. But all of a sudden in that scene, those are critical parts of
the lore is not built there. And you do wonder where she got that from. I do want to kind of talk a little bit more about that because, like I said, we are introduced to this whole concept in the early 1900s, and we see the child that Eartha Kitt is playing in modern day. I'm still like, this took place in the late 19th century. I keep saying 1900s. I mean 19th century. The late 19th century. So this is the 1800s.
There are a couple of mentions. I don't think the film says it specifically, but the Wikipedia page and some other things say that opening flashback scene is in 1891. So specifically 100 years earlier.
100 years. Yeah. So Eartha Kitt's character is at least 112 or 14, however old that child is meant to be.
Yeah, and I can buy that, I think. I mean, granted, yes, it is really, really old, and Eartha Kitt does not look 114, but by movie rules, 114 is still like super old lady old.
Sure.
We have a troll in this film. I can buy that Eartha Kitt is 110. It's
sure. But yeah, I mean, so like you said, he gives the curse,
Yeah.
and they plant the tree around it,
Yeah.
all of that kind of stuff. What shocks me about the scene that you just mentioned with all of the stuff that Ernest has to say, obviously Eartha Kitt owns this land, has bought this land specifically to keep this area of the forest secluded.
Yep.
So that this does not happen. Then, when Ernest goes to be like, why are you so upset? She specifically tells him how to release the troll.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Also, like I said earlier, I think it's a real loss.
The one specific person
Yeah.
who can release the troll.
Yes. That she knows there are specific rules on how to release this thing, and then
Yes.
she conveys those rules to him.
So really, none of this is Ernest's fault. This is all Eartha Kitt's fault.
Yes. By the way, there is a passing mention. I do like the throwaway bit about how part of Trantor's curse was he made the Worrells increasingly dumber as generations went on.
Which once again, and we've talked about this before.
Yeah.
They keep selling Ernest as a dumb, simple character.
Yeah.
And then they show him having remarkable mechanical know-how.
Yeah.
He's always building these complex machines. And yes, they often have a flaw.
Yeah.
Or, they mess up in one way or another. But that's often because of what Ernest is doing with them.
He has segmented intelligence here. He has good mechanical knowledge. He's just not good.
Right, but I'm just like, he's not that dumb.
Yeah.
If he is able to build these complex machines and basically save himself work, that's it's a little bit of a disconnect.
Yeah.
But okay, this is not the first time that they've done that. Whatever. We want to portray Ernest as a mechanical genius, yet in all other things a dumbass. Whatever.
So, but yeah, they established that that's part of the curse. I don't know where they learned that, because Trantor didn't say that when he went in the hole. But
no. She that is part of Elizabeth's report, because and it.
Oh, you're right.
It's not. It's not even said like Trantor, said that it was more just like, how did the curse play out? And she's just like, well, people just noticed, kind of thing. That Worrell's descendants got dumber and dumber, and that's, of course, they cut to Ernest. That's how we're introduced. Yeah.
But yeah, as the film goes on, like we suddenly have language that has to release Trantor. We see the book. Not sure who wrote the book with all the rules about Trantor, because again, it presumably did not exist.
Well, it seems to be a book of troll lore that also contains Trantor. It's not specifically. So I would imagine that that's probably just like an old, English book containing, knowledge about all sorts of trolls. That was probably put together by somebody hundreds of years ago that just knew about different types of trolls.
But as the film goes on, it keeps, at the very least, the film keeps revealing additional parts to this plan. It's like, okay, he can take children.
Sure.
Also, he needs 5. And once he has 5 children that he turns into wood, then he releases his army. Also, the little Brussels sprouts have to hit the ground. That's when they grow into an army.
Well, I mean, I think I think some of that stuff is kind of hinted at in the first revealing of the book.
Yeah.
Because I'm fine with them not giving us all of the finer points of Trantor's plan up to that.
Yeah.
Because then I'd be like, well, how do they know?
Yeah.
So I'm fine with them introducing that with the book. Even the whole thing about, because it just says the pods will fall like rain. And I think it says something about and be birthed in the earth or something like that.
Okay.
So the idea of not letting them touch the ground is really earnest when they start to fall.
Yeah.
At which point I'm just like, dude, number one, how many of these things are there? Because it looks like hundreds the
Yes.
way that they're falling. But I'm just like, dude, get a bag.
Yes.
Do you not have some? Because he starts missing some, and eventually he just drops them all. And I'm like,
yeah.
you could have at least kept like 5 trolls from happening.
Like I think his truck is sitting right there. He could just toss them in the bed.
Yes, exactly. But obviously, it's all for
All for
physical
slapstick.
comedy and for physical humor. I will say there are times when they do things for physical comedy that I think are a little bit of a detriment to anything else that's going on. The scene specifically that made me just go, okay, it's kind of fun, but it's also just utterly ridiculous. The scene when Trantor attacks him in the truck, because he is driving.
Yes.
He is driving this truck. Trantor attacks his truck. Ernest then gets out of his truck and starts fighting Trantor. Meanwhile, the truck is still moving the entire time.
Yes.
And they show, yes, that rim shot. I will say we get a lot more rim shot in this film. Rim shot's a lot of fun in this film. You know, any other issue that I might have with this film, I'm just like, well, we get a lot more rim shot. Rim shot's great.
Yes.
But we see that he's steering, but he's not pushing the gas pedal. So how the hell is this truck still moving?
There's a slight downward incline. It is it's
Sure. And they're just filming it that it looks like it's going straight forward.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, the fight itself in that scene is fun.
Yeah.
But I'm just like, the logic is, but again, like I said, they are intentionally making a B movie here. This is meant to be a B monster movie film. And so I'm not mad at those types of things. It's just, we've talked before about how, a lot of very few of the early Ernest films was Ernest actually the protagonist. He was pretty inarguably the protagonist of Ernest Goes to Jail. But here, once again, just like a lot of his previous films, most of what we're seeing Ernest do are just episodic physical gags. I mean, you could argue that he's still definitely the protagonist because the plot has so much to do with him and he let the troll out. But a lot of his action is not protagonist action. It is side character, comic relief action. And I will say at times it seems like they are trying to hand the protagonist role over to Kenny. But Kenny's a young child actor. Kenny, by the way, played by Austin Nagler. And from what I see, I don't think he's done a whole lot of other work. But he does fine in this, but he's not that interesting.
Yeah.
And so he can't really, take over the film from Ernest while Ernest is doing his side character stuff. So I think that's part of where the disjointedness of the story comes from for me, is that our protagonist is not a protagonist. Is the issue. So the story does get lost.
Yeah.
Because what we needed is for this story to actually be about Kenny rather than being kind of about Ernest and kind of about Kenny, but it's really about Ernest. We're just going to have Kenny do stuff while Ernest is just doing silly shtick.
Yeah.
It
could also get through that by giving more of an arc to Ernest, which doesn't mean like you have to make him a deep character, but the title of the movie is Ernest Scared Stupid. Like,
Right. I mean,
the arc could be Ernest is scared and Ernest has to overcome that fear.
Right, and they do give him an arc, but it's not they don't stick with it.
It's not woven through the film.
Exactly. We get beats here and there. Again, he is the descendant of Phineas. He releases the troll.
Yes.
You know, in a very silly, making fun of the way that Eartha Kitt, you know, told him about. We keep saying Eartha Kitt. Her character's name is Old Lady Hackmore, or Frances Hackmore. But I just think of her as Eartha Kitt.
Okay.
But you know, you know, so we're getting that, and then we're getting the, you know, again, a regular protagonist in the film would have been the one to realize milk, you know, destroys the troll.
Yeah.
But Ernest, because he is the side comic relief character, when he sees that, he assumes Miak, because that is the role that his character would normally assume in these films. And so, and then, you know, obviously we get him spurned back into action when Rimshot gets turned into, you know, into wood. I do want to ask you about that, because I have always, and I don't know if it's just that I'm not seeing it right, but every time I look at that, I'm like, that doesn't look like a dog to me. That wouldn't, because the wooden miniatures of the kids are actually really good.
Yeah, they're
really
good
articulate.
Yeah.
They look really solid.
They do.
Whereas the miniature of, I mean, number one, it's bigger than, it feels in scale bigger than any of the kids. I think ultimately they might actually all be the same size, but because Rimshot himself is already smaller than the children, it seems like his miniature is bigger than theirs. But it just looks like, I mean, I will say I can see articulation on the hind legs, but the front, I don't know if it was just because he's like making this motion at the time or something, but it just looks like at that end, just a piece of wood. So I'm just like, it's unfortunate that, you know, we couldn't get as good of an articulation on the Rimshot, you know, miniature as we did with the children.
I wonder if they, while filming, kind of had the same opinion, because I noticed that for subsequent scenes, like they didn't.
It's not featured as much. I mean, we see that he's put it on the dashboard. Yes. Honestly, some of those gags are pretty good. You know, he runs the truck into the tree, and he's like, "You all right, Rimshot? Good." Yeah. One of the advantages of being a wooden dog.
Yes. But the thing is, he says that, but I'm not entirely certain. Like, we get a good look at Rimshot.
No, I think the most what we see the most of it is the back, which in my opinion is the best looking part of that miniature.
Yes. But which goes to my point. Maybe they just realized this prop doesn't look as great as it should, and so then they just had to scoot around it, kind of.
Yeah. Because you can tell there are times when Ernest is holding it and he's kind of hiding the front of it. I mean, part of that is him, you know, holding it the way he would his dog, but he is kind of hiding the worst looking part of it, you know. And I'm just like, yeah.
By the way, also in terms of like complicated mythologies that went on, at one point it mentions that Ernest is the seventh son of a seventh son, which is standard mythology type stuff, but just randomly tossed out.
And she just throws that line out at him at a certain point.
Yeah.
I do want to talk about Eartha Kitt, number one, just being in this movie. She is obviously the get in this film. I mean, number one, she's Eartha Kitt.
Yes.
So of course she's going to be your get, but she's also
the only name actor in this.
Yeah. I mean, outside of Jim Varney, which, you know, one would argue that his, you know, he has more.
He's largely essential to an Ernest film. Yeah.
Right. But you know, she definitely is the big. And I remember, you know, her having a bigger impact in this film. And watching it last night, and I'm like, she has some good scenes
Yeah.
here and there, but she's not nearly as big of a character in this film as I remember her being.
Yeah, I mean, she kills it in all the scenes she's in.
Agreed. Agreed.
But and yeah, I had strong memories of it. With the thing she also reminded me of, I was gonna meme this and send it to a friend of mine. Especially in her first scene, she reminds me of, I think, is it Agra? From the
Yes, from the Dark Crystal. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I can totally see that.
Yeah, Agra. I was getting the spelling wrong. Yeah, but the dress, the hair, the
Well-
general hyper, crazy.
Honestly, I mean, it's a different time period, but she's got kind of a mix of like the old historical look with, it's kind of a proto steampunk
Yeah.
look that she's got going here, because she's got like the welding goggles that
Yes.
she's constantly wearing, but she's also wearing very like old-fashioned beaten up clothes. Honestly, and I don't know if this was any intention, it looks like she's wearing the same dress that she was wearing in the opening.
Oh,
Like
I didn't
she
pick up on that. Yeah.
never changed out of those clothes.
Yeah. I mean, she's lived through the 20th century. It makes sense she would adapt over time.
Well, I mean, she is introduced in the course of the film to, because Ernest is the he drives the garbage truck, and we are first introduced to the idea of Old Lady Hackmore is that the mayor of the town, played by Larry Black, who we saw previously as the lead counselor in Ernest Goes to Camp.
Oh, okay.
I think this might be the only other Ernest film that he's in, but I'd forgotten he was in this one.
Yeah.
But yeah, he basically is on Ernest. He was like, you need to get out there and you need to clean up her place. Then we get there, and number one, it kind of looks like the set of Sanford and Son, because it's just like piles of junk and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But you can also tell that she's making art out of it.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of Dean's Place in the Iron Giant.
Sure. Yeah. I get that.
Like that's not junk. That's art. It's
Yeah.
especially the stuff on her door is conspicuously, like, I don't find it attractive, but like it's very intentionally put.
Yes, it is. That is the word for it. It is intentional. I mean,
Yes.
her door knocker is a metal arm that you push into these like metal bindings that just would make a whole lot of noise.
Yeah. Frankly, the intentionality of it comes through when, especially from some of the wider shots of the front of the Hackmore estate. It does sort of betray that this is a normal looking house. They have dressed up just to look like a junk house, and like can only do so much like damage to the front of it, because it still looks
right.
The porch itself looks fine, actually. Like but there's mainly just like some stuff slapped up on the front. I think they might have like put some plywood up, some general paint to make dirty it up. But on the whole, like this would be like an afternoon of cleaning it up. Like,
well, I mean, I think the mayor's issue is, the piles of junk in the front yard. Exactly. But again, this is like my thing was, number one, it seems like her place is pretty separate from the whole rest of the town.
Yeah.
And it sounds like she owns it.
Oh, yeah.
So what the hell is the mayor getting all up in arms about, throwing away her property on her property?
I made a note that it says that the sheriff had served her with papers, whatever those would be. I assume we're looking at some kind of code violation.
I guess, but again, it's on her property.
But that doesn't mean it's not a code violation. I mean, if I have a junk car sitting out here in my front yard, the city of Brookhaven will come and complain about that.
Okay.
So that could be basically, But at the end of the day, it's just a plot justification for garbage man Ernest P. Worrell to end up in contact with Old Lady Hackmore.
Right. Right.
Although honestly, it's not even really necessary for him to do that, because the point of him coming in contact with her would more naturally be that she finds him in her backyard. Like he's come looking for a tree and has somehow crossed over into her property. And
Yeah. We honestly don't really even need that first
No.
scene except to establish her as Old Lady Hackmore.
as old Lady Hackmore. Yeah, nothing ever comes of her having junk on her property. That doesn't matter.
No.
I'm not going to complain about getting more extra Eartha Kitt in this film.
No, absolutely not.
Especially because, like I said, maybe Eartha Kitt only had like 2 days to shoot on this too. Maybe that's why we don't get a scene of her, like, again, explaining the rules of Trantor to Ernest the first time.
Well, because honestly, one of my biggest issues with the film, and it honestly kind of ties into another scene later on, but just to establish the Trantor gets his 5 souls, and the pods drop, and several trolls are created. Although I will say distinctly, there are 2 scenes back to back that have the exact same troll in 2 different places at the same time.
Okay. Yeah.
And even as a kid, I remember noticing that and just thinking, are they just twin trolls? Are they just 2 trolls that look exactly the same? And I mean, now as an adult, I'm like, they probably just didn't realize that they had the exact same troll in 2 prominent places. Because I'm sure that they were limited on, the number of creatures that they could afford to create, much less anything else. And it's at this point I do want to mention, and I think we've talked about it before, but I believe at least one, if not more, of these trolls were repurposed from Killer Clowns.
Yes, I was going to bring up the same thing.
Yeah. But yeah, they fall. But the kids, Kenny, who didn't see the book and only 1 letter missing, when Ernest assumed Miak, just somehow puts it together for Mother's Care, which, by the way, that part of the story had nothing to do with the fact that milk would destroy them.
No.
But somehow Kenny put that together.
Yes. This makes up for the lack of the virginity plot from Hocus Pocus by this one having Mother's Care being milk. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, there's still a little bit of that working in. Yeah. But yeah, so, they... And also in that scene where he figures out it's the milk is, Ernest had ice cream on his hands and Trantor kind of, shied away and ran. And, so that but, he mutters Mother's Care. And I'm like, you could just be like, he was afraid of the ice cream.
Yeah.
Could milk stop him? Something like there's a little bit of this, figuring out that doesn't completely make sense.
True.
Which brings me into my 2 biggest scenes that I have issues with. Around the same time that we had the milk scene, basically that happened when Ernest went to the big fall fest. By the way, pretty much all of its action happens in 2 days. Most of it in 1 day on Halloween. All of it really happens on the first bit. It's like the first 20 minutes of the movie when Ernest releases the troll. That's about it. All the rest of it happens on Halloween. But there is a scene, and we see Eartha Kitt, who is I can't even remember why she's at the school, but she has what actually is a very good reaction shot. But what she's reacting to is a shit scene. It's just a really bad scene between a mother and a child that hates her costume.
Yeah.
And she's just like, well, you chose this costume, So we are going to go here and you're going to have a good attitude about it. And we're going to have, and she's, the kid starts to storm off. And then she stops and she goes, Mother. She turns around and she's like, I love you. And it's like, where the hell did that come from? I'm not getting the lines exactly right.
Yeah,
But that's basically the journey that this child goes on. She's pissed, and then suddenly, I love you, Mother. Oh, I love you too. It makes no sense.
Yeah. And then, old lady Hackmore has a revelation and realizes, wait, that's what it is. It's a mother's care or whatever. Yeah.
It's
Heart
unconditional love.
Yeah.
The heart of a child. Unconditional love. And so that leads me to the second scene that I have a big issue with. And I will say less because, no offense to those people, but the performance wasn't great. They weren't given a lot to work with. It's just, it was just a shit scene all around. But then cut to the end, the kids have taken care of all of the trolls except for Trantor, who we discover has gone back under the tree.
Yep.
I guess now he can just go, under the tree anytime he feels like it.
I would like to note too that the fact that there is a cavern under the tree is weird because the first thing we saw in this movie is throwing dirt on top of Trantor. Like,
right,
he should be pretty much covered in dirt.
Yes, yeah, that is weird. But I mean, yeah, we also discovered that there's a little cubby hole specifically for children, and I'm just like, did this, like, where were you keeping the children the first time?
Mm-hmm.
And Eartha Kitt puts because we established he had stolen 4 souls previously.
Yes.
In that, by the way, in that scene where he's caught, we see a POV shot of him chasing a young girl who is not even trying not to smile and laugh. She says, I'm just like, I don't know if that was a choice or if they just could not get that girl to not smile.
That was
so
the best take they could get out of that. Yeah,
possibly. But like I said, all of that stuff aside, we're at the end. They've taken care of all of the other trolls, but Trantor has now asked for help from the demons to strengthen him.
Yes.
And
again, we've now introduced demons here, like in 5 minutes from the end of this film. Yes.
I will say I do like the blue ghost effect.
Yes.
It's a little silly and it's a little, kiddie, but I like it. I think
it works with the B movie aesthetic of all of this.
Yeah, exactly. It works with the aesthetic of this film, I think. But and then we establish in the treehouse that now he is impervious to the milk. Yes. But the only one who actually saw that was Kenny. I mean, you could argue that, he's up in a pretty low treehouse. Other people probably could have heard that.
Yeah.
But movie doesn't matter. Ernest at this point does not know that the milk will not affect Trantor.
Yeah.
So Trantor is basically, he even tells Ernest, this is it. The final battle. I'm going to take you out. And Ernest reaches for the milk and he starts like goading him. And then all of a sudden, and look, I think that Jim Varney does as good a job with this scene as he can. I think that he makes it look like it starts to make sense to Ernest as much as he can, but it was never established to him. Number one, he doesn't know the milk won't work. Mm-hmm. So he doesn't have any reason to try to come up with a different option here. So I almost wish that they had let everybody know that Kenny already tried the milk. It didn't work. So that Ernest has to, so that we understand why Ernest all of a sudden realizes he needs to find a different way.
Yeah.
But from what we know, Ernest doesn't know that. So it makes no sense that he suddenly tries to find a different way.
The more elegant way of doing this probably would have been just not to have Kenny be the one to discover it in the first place. Trantor, changes Kenny. Trantor then confronts Ernest or whatever. Ernest tries to shoot him with milk. Then he has the same line, "I am too powerful for milk," or whatever. And
Right.
you accomplish the same thing. You don't have to double anything up.
I mean, I honestly would have been fine them doing, because I do kind of like
The thing,
that
it's
by
not
the
a
time
bit
he
of a
comes down to that final confrontation with Ernest, Ernest doesn't try something that doesn't work.
Yeah.
I do like that the very next interaction that he has with Ernest is the last interaction. I
Yeah.
like that progression. I just wish that when Kenny tried it and it failed,
Yeah.
we'd let all the other characters in on that rather than it just being a scene between him and Kenny.
You also could have accomplished that, yes, some other way where everyone realizes at the same time Kenny does. You stage
Right.
it differently, however it is.
Or here's an idea, because I'm about to talk about the absolute ineffectualness of all of the other adults in this film.
Yeah.
With the exception of Ernest and Eartha Kitt, all the other adults in this are absolute morons and in some instances horrible people and all bad at their jobs.
Yeah.
We'll get back to that. But what they could have done when we see Trantor transform Kenny and then for some reason jumps down on top of Kenny. When I first saw that as a kid, I was like, crap, he just killed Kenny.
Oh my God, he killed Kenny.
Yeah, exactly.
That bastard.
Yeah, but like that was, to me, that was why he did that. Was to not only transform the child, but to utterly destroy him.
Mm-hmm.
But we see later, no, that doll's fine. It didn't break, the wooden figurine. So I don't know why we had him jump down on top of him.
Yeah.
It doesn't really track. It doesn't make sense. If you're not trying to tell a story with that, why do it?
Yeah.
But unless of course, it was supposed to lead to a sequel that it, messed up Kenny in some way, but what they could have done once they revealed, all of the parents could have then started pelting him with dairy products.
Mm-hmm.
And then we would have seen.
And then you realize it doesn't work. So yeah,
exactly. So then he tells Ernest, "I'm coming to get you." And Ernest is like, well, the milk doesn't work. What do I do? And because we have Eartha Kitt whispering,
yeah,
Ernest doesn't understand. It's not the milk. It's the heart of a child. Unconditional love. Eartha Kitt is great. I mean, one of my favorite bits, and I still don't know how this isn't a GIF, but when all of the regular trolls have been destroyed, mm-hmm. and Eartha Kitt is the only one that knows that we're not done here yet. She comes out and she's like, "It's not over yet. It's not over yet." And I'm just like, how is this not a GIF that everyone uses, like in the middle of a sporting event, or God forbid, elections, or
yes.
But it seems like this is a scene that is begging to be GIFed.
Yes, I will see to GIFing that. Yes,
because it's just brilliant. It's not over. I can't tell you how many times I've used that just in normal conversation, where somebody makes a declarative statement. I'm just like, it's not over yet. It's not over yet, and they have no clue what I'm talking
about. We're gonna make that a thing.
It has to be. It has to be. But yeah, so she's whispering to the mayor about it. Once again, if she had yelled this to Ernest, again, I don't think that would have even been a very elegant solution. It would have felt clumsy to do, but at least it would have made sense.
Yeah.
But instead, Ernest, who, as far as he's concerned, has what he needs to destroy the troll, mm-hmm. suddenly just shifts and unconditional love. the heart of a child. At what point did he put that together? We don't know. Again, I think Jim Varney, this is the first time I've ever realized that doesn't make sense, because as a kid, I was sold by Jim Varney's performance. He makes it work. And I will say, I do wonder if maybe, because, that information, not the correlation of heart of a child means unconditional love. Eartha Kitt had that realization on her own, which we never got to see her share with Ernest. It would have been nice. Again, though, I don't know if this is a fault of they just thought that it didn't matter, or maybe this was part of a scene that was shot and then left on the cutting room floor in editing. I don't know. Either way, I'm just saying, watching this now, I noticed that and it doesn't make sense, and I don't think it works.
One of my takeaways from that end scene was that the scene of Ernest having a certain interpretive revelation regarding basically sort of a prophetic type advice, and then realizing how to do this confrontation. A lot of echoes from the end of Ernest Goes to Camp. That's when he's we're getting the voiceover, whatever it is, about the statement about like the heart of steel or whatever it was, and
the wood, the stone, and the
all of that,
the air, or something like that. The blade, the stone, and the arrow.
The blade, the stone, and the arrow.
But yeah, I do, because we mentioned it. I said I want to come back to it. I want to talk about the other adults in this film, because we have our two biggest examples are the mayor, who is not only the mayor of the town and does kind of bully Ernest, but also he is the father of the bullies of the film. They're just called the Murdochs. Matt and Mike.
Wait, they're Matt and Mike Murdoch?
Yeah.
Oh, that might be a comic joke.
Oh, really?
Yes, Matt Murdoch.
Matt Murdoch. Yeah,
Matt Murdoch is Daredevil, obviously.
Daredevil.
Yes.
Yeah.
But back in the 80s, I think it was, there was a plot line in the Daredevil comics at one point. I guarantee you, this is never going to come up probably never going to come up in the TV show. Now that Disney's doing another Daredevil TV show,
right?
But at one point, given that Matt himself is publicly blind, but can secretly have like his radar sense, that I've never read the story, so I might be getting some of this wrong. But as part of his cover, Matt Murdoch, I think, pretends he's dead or pretends he's disabled or whatever, and Matt Murdoch's identical twin brother, Mike Murdoch, shows up.
That is funny.
But it's still Matt Murdoch. Like he doesn't have a twin. It's just Matt pretending to be his own twin,
right?
Who can see. So like, because then Matt doesn't feel the need to pretend that he doesn't have the radar sense. So Mike can see. I think he always wears sunglasses. So
okay.
People can't notice that he doesn't look.
Yeah, I was about to say that, because his eyes are
his eyes still aren't going to function just right.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But that's part of his cover, is that the people won't think that Mike Murdoch is actually just Matt, because obviously Mike can see. And Mike Murdoch has been a joke, for years, because it's a really silly plot development that he's running around as his own fake twin. But there's no way they named these kids Mike and Matt Murdoch, and
without some intentionality. Yeah, no, that is. But like we said, they are the bullies.
Yes,
and they're just kind of hateful.
Yeah.
We do get
there's no sense of what the rivalry is here. They're just mean, terrible kids.
Yeah. I will say,
I watched Megan the other day. The robot android kid.
Sure.
There's a nasty little bully kid in that, but at least you get the sense that he's just a spoiled bratty kid. These kids are just bad.
I mean, I will say it is made pretty clear that the mayor dotes on them and has probably been told, "Hey, mayor, your kids are kind of bullies."
Yeah.
And he just, no, they're not, because he's kind of a bully himself. So I do think we could probably go the spoil can get away with anything angle with them. So I kind of believe that as why they're bullies because they've never been corrected. They've
Yeah.
never been told that acting, treating people like dirt is not the right way to go.
Yeah.
But like I said, Larry Black plays the mayor. Does not come across as a very nice human being. Fires Ernest at one point.
Yep.
But then we also have Daniel Butler, in honestly probably his biggest role.
At least in the movies so far, yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue that maybe Eddie was comparable to this, but he's playing Sheriff Cliff Binder, Kenny's dad, and the thing though, and I wrote it down several times. I'm like, the sheriff is not good at his job. He's not good at his job. He's not good at being a dad because Kenny keeps basically giving him the answers.
Yep.
And he's just like, oh, go tell your mother. Oh, go home. Oh, do this. Oh, do that. And at one point, he straight up apologizes to Kenny. And he's just like, I wrote down the line specifically. I gotta read this because it's just kind of too perfect. There it is. Okay. He's at the end of the film, he goes to Kenny after he's been, transformed back into a child, and he's just like, Kenny, I'm sorry. I did a lot of things wrong. And I'm just like, that just feels like a blanket statement for this entire film. Because every time that he makes any sort of decision or does anything in this film, it's like, you're just not concerned about this at all. You're bad at your job. You're bad at being a dad. You're just bad at all of this. And honestly, most of the adults in this film, like I said, come off as either incompetent, which is saying something considering that the comparison is Ernest.
Yeah.
Or mean. I mean, there are like times when the way that the sheriff deals with Kenny are just mean. And I'm just like, listen to your fucking kid, dude. It's just extremely dismissive. And I'm just like, I don't know if this was an intentional choice to make all of the other parents like bad and ineffectual. I mean, even, this one is a little bit more understanding, but, Elizabeth's mom, when Elizabeth is like, can you please look at me? She's like, you're not 5. You're but, just kind of being completely dismissive of all of this stuff, which, in turn ends up getting Elizabeth transformed into a wooden doll. But yeah, so I'm just like, what do you think? Did you notice how bad all of the other adults were in this film?
It's not something that stood out to me.
Sure.
But I mean, but you are correct. Yeah, the adults are terribly ineffectual. They don't have an impact on the story really at all.
Yeah.
I thought for a moment when they had the big school function in the gym. I could be wrong. I think there's a big school function at a gym in Hocus Pocus too.
Yes. Yeah.
I thought for a minute there that the point of the adults in this scene was going to be they were going to turn on Ernest in some way. Maybe that they don't believe this is a troll incident that's real or something. Not that like Ernest is like a child.
Well, because at first when he's raising the alarm, he's just treated as an annoyance by most of the adults.
But that he would somehow have to, more directly redeem himself. Like he would have to be like, I don't know, running from them. So somehow Ernest would be in conflict with the parents more directly.
Sure.
And that's not really what happened.
No, I mean, honestly, other than the instances that we get of specific interactions between, the adults and other characters, they're mostly kind of the people of this town are seen as kind of a mob.
Yeah.
Which also doesn't paint them in the best light because they come together as this unruly mob and then are immediately, basically owned by these trolls.
They're very, very ineffectual mob. Yes.
100%. In fact, there's a scene where the only one holding his own against these trolls is Ernest.
Yeah.
He is, beating them down left and right. I mean, he doesn't have the milk, so he's not destroying them, but he is like, knocking them out of the treehouse and things like that. But there is
all very slapsticky, but yes.
Right. Oh, absolutely. But there's a scene where there is a guy in a bee costume. And he is being like choked from behind by one of the trolls. And he's and Ernest has a bowling ball. And the assumption here is that Ernest is going to beat the troll so that this guy can get away. So he does this whole like comedic thing with the bowling ball, drops the bowling ball, and what does it hit? But the guy in the bee costume, not the troll.
Nope.
And Ernest then congratulates himself, to which I was like, okay, I don't know if the movie is telling us that this is a silly mistake that Ernest made and he doesn't know, or was that his target the whole time?
Oh, I assumed he didn't know. I was disappointed in that too. Because in those moments I prefer for Ernest to have to own his own mistake. It's like,
right. But honestly, I think either. I mean, I think you're right. I think that the former was the intention, but the way that these adults have been portrayed, the other read works because they're not helping. They're not doing anything. In fact, they're part of the problem.
Yeah. No, I wonder, sitting here now, I wonder if it would have worked better if, like, maybe some of the adults could have been turned to wood. I do find it interesting.
I don't know.
I don't know if that would have worked.
I mean, I was about to say, I don't know if he could turn them to wood, but he did turn Rimshot.
He turned Rimshot to wood.
Then Rimshot is, in a sense, Ernest's child.
Yes.
For anyone that has pets, it's similar. Obviously, it's different.
No, but I find it structurally interesting that, like, we spend so much of the film, again, treating Trantor by and large as like a straightforward B-movie horror villain. Yeah. And then because he's not really comically, a menace through most of the film. He is legitimately scary in some sense.
Yeah.
The most comedic we might get, I suppose, is when Rimshot backs the car into him, and the shot of him just collapsing on the road. But
I was gonna say the scene where he runs into the car door.
Maybe that too, yeah. But basically, it's where he's the butt of a certain bit of physical comedy. Yeah,
right, right.
But it's not played up with sound effects or anything like that necessarily. It's but then we get to the big climactic scene where we have multiple trolls, and it's just straight up all played for slapstick.
Yeah, true. But again, I think that they were always meant to be seen in a different light than Trantor.
Sure.
Because, they are, his children.
Lesser versions of him.
Exactly. They're lesser versions to the point where, I mean, it's played kind of like a video game. When they're all demolished, he has to be souped up so that he's hard. Right. He's the boss. He has to be harder to defeat than them.
Yeah.
So I do think that there is kind of a tier. They're on a lower tier than he is.
Sure.
But yeah, was there, because honestly, the only other things I can think to talk about are things that I'm gonna cover in other segments.
Yeah.
So is there anything else that you specifically wanted to talk about?
Well, let's see about the film in general. Let's see. What do I got? I could be wrong, but given the fact that this film was shot in Tennessee again, I think the sheriff's house is Vern's house.
Okay.
When he goes to the door and and the sheriff is trying to shove him back out. I think that's the same door that Ernest comes to in like a bunch of old commercials and like in maybe in Ernest Saves Christmas when he brings the Christmas tree.
Yeah.
But because that was a house that a front door specifically that Ernest would interact with on more than one
Yeah.
occasion. Also no Vern in this movie. That's right.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
as far as we know, he's only mentioned in Ernest Saves Christmas.
Yeah. Let's see. In terms of like the horror stuff, when I'd forgotten about this, but the bit where Elizabeth's checking under the bed, then she gets back up and Trantor turns over and Trantor's in her bed. Solid good horror scare. That's a good bit right there. At the end when Trantor explodes reminds me of Scanners when the guy's head explodes.
Oh yeah, honestly, 100. I remember because when the end was happening, I was like, oh yeah, his head's gonna explode. My biggest note about that though is that obviously his head explodes.
Yeah.
But you would expect, especially in an Ernest movie, for there to be more gore associated with that. Like Ernest would then be like covered in some sort of slime or goo or something. Nothing.
Yeah.
We are seeing no remnants of Trantor anywhere.
Yeah.
And I thought that was kind of odd.
Let's see what else I got.
Yeah.
I think in the same scene where Ernest is referred to as the seventh son of a seventh son, he's referred to as the Great Redneck Hope. It's like I wish they'd kept that.
Yeah.
That title should have hung around for Ernest.
Great Redneck Hope. Yeah, no, that was great. I wrote that down in my notes too. I
wanted that to be a subtitle for a future Ernest movie. Was just the Great Redneck Hope.
Yeah. Ernest, the Great Redneck Hope.
Let's see what else I got here. I'm sure you're going to talk about this in a second, but
honestly, and this will make more sense in the when we watch it, but that could have been actually the subtitle for Ernest Rides Again, because Ernest Rides. I mean, I kind of get it, but the Great Redneck Hope actually would have been a really solid subtitle for that.
The Great Redneck Hope: an Ernest P. Worrell story.
Yeah. Or Ernest, the Great Redneck Hope.
Let's see what else had here. Obviously I did not realize this growing up, but watching it now, after we have done this series, one of the things that stood out to me in this film, which never would have registered with me before, is that all the milk in this movie is purity milk.
Oh yeah, no, I wrote that down too. I was like, that is purity milk.
It's all purity milk.
Purity milk.
It's a purity milk truck that shows up.
I thought that was a great I mean, honestly, they're in Tennessee. That's probably just the most prominent milk that they could have gotten.
I mean, it probably is, but there's no way they set this up like for scenes where Ernest himself.
They also were probably like, this is going to be a great. I mean, I don't know if the term Easter egg was really, but this is going to be fun for anybody that notices.
I mean, now that I've seen, and in case there's anyone listening who doesn't know, back when he was a pitch man, Jim Varney as Ernest did advertisements for Purity Milk. Lots of advertisements for Purity Milk. But it honestly makes me halfway wonder now is like, was it written to be milk intentionally to use purity milk? Like, did they come up with using milk?
Sure.
Didn't choose purity.
I will say,
you know what? We'll throw a bone to the people who sponsored us back in the day. The thing that defeats Trantor, milk. That's what we're going to use.
I will say, Ernest, just before milk is established as the primary weapon against the trolls, Ernest just randomly has more milk than any other film character I've ever seen. Like he just happens to always have milk or be getting milk or have milk around.
He's at the gas station. He's got a pile of like ding dongs and sweet cakes. And, and a thing of milk. Yeah,
and a thing. It's not. It's very rarely a prominent thing for any character in a film.
Yes. Also, again, there's a milk truck that shows up in this film, apparently on Halloween. By the way, I texted my siblings, my brother and sister, and said, pop quiz, in Ernest Scared Stupid, what does Ernest misread in the book is the substance that will defeat the trolls? And I said, like, what? I'm looking for what Ernest said out loud, not what the book said. And my brother texted back to say, Australian Miak. Which is close enough. Also, he spelled it M-I-Y-A-K, but that's fair enough. Like, we only see it once on the book, but he knows it's Miak. My sister did not remember. My brother remembered 30 years later. It's Miak.
Authentic Bulgarian Miak. Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
And what else do I got here?
Yeah.
Oh, just a couple of small bits that I like. There's a cutaway gag we get twice when it's mentioned about like Ernest didn't know where to quit, and then it cuts to his 4th grade teacher. Him scraping on.
Which was one of the things that was in the trailers. I remember specifically seeing that. Yeah.
Ernest says like one of the things about him is he doesn't know when to quit. My 4th grade teacher told me that. Almost Family Guy style cutaway.
Just ask my 4th grade.
Just ask my 4th grade teacher. Cutaway gag to Ernest writing on the chalkboard, and the teacher's telling he didn't know how to quit, and then slaps him in there.
Well, and he keeps doing the nails in the chalkboard thing, and I'm just like, oh, please stop.
He does that twice. Yes, so we get 2 cutaways to that. I like that as a cutaway gag. It's honestly, it was a funny enough gag. I wish we'd had more cutaways like that.
Yeah.
And second, just because the Ernest movies don't have a lot of great cinematography, I did appreciate one particular cut, which was I think it's when Ernest goes to visit old lady Hackmore, and she's screaming, and she screams, and it just cuts into
the flamethrower thing.
Okay, yeah, I think she has a flamethrower. She's doing the flamethrower. She's screaming. The camera is on her screaming, and then it just sort of cuts to Elizabeth screaming as part of like their haunted house setup.
That's because she does the flamethrower thing, and it cuts, but she's shooting
and then it cuts over to Elizabeth, same place in the shot, also screaming. It was, if you've seen it going around, there's a meme about just Spielberg having a really great shot in with The Lost World when it cuts over to like Ian Malcolm almost like being a dinosaur. It's hard to describe here on a podcast.
I know exactly the scene you're talking about.
But no, the cut between Eartha Kitt screaming and Elizabeth screaming was better cinematography than I'm used to with these films.
Yeah.
And then finally, because I left this for last simply because I'm certain you're going to talk about this, is Ernest's characters.
Honestly, I was about to bring this up because I realized that we haven't talked about this yet.
Yes.
But we have mentioned in the past that, he always does some characters, but especially in the last 2, it was specifically to, try to pull the wool over somebody's eyes, try to deceive somebody.
Within the story, it is specifically Ernest putting on a costume to deceive someone else. That's why these characters
trying to disguise.
Yes.
In this one, it blatant, and they even make reference to it. It seems like these are just different aspects of his personality now.
Yeah. Kenny drops a line about like all you people or something.
Yeah. He's just like, I mean, it's a little, irreverent now, but he's like, oh, so now I got to deal with your multiple personalities.
That's it.
Yeah. Which I don't know. I want to say, first of all, I indisputably love the character work that Jim Varney does in this film. It's one of the highlights of it for me. I love especially the other lady that he does, the one with the hairspray.
Yes.
Hairspray will work on anything.
He does a good job with that.
I love that. One of my favorite lines in the whole thing is when he's doing the which I wrote this down because they do this bit where when Ernest is trying to explain, he's like, you can beat these bullies, it doesn't matter that they're bigger than you. It's like when Botswana took down the Ottoman Empire.
Yeah.
And he basically gives Kenny a fun little history lesson about Botswana, taking down the Ottoman Empire. And all I wrote was, this is more cohesive, more interesting, more entertaining than all of Hey Vern, It's Ernest. If Hey Vern, It's Ernest had been this, it would have worked. And it was I'll say semi-educational because we didn't get a full through line into what actually happened.
I'm not sure what the actual how much, if any, actual truth there is to Botswana defeating the Ottoman Empire. So
Right. But, at least the way that it is framed,
yes,
it actually comes across pretty well. And I'm like, this is a fun little teaching thing that you could have done that would have worked. Kids show thing that you could have done that would have worked way better than what you actually did.
no,
But-
no, that is an excellent point. Yes, you're right. Yeah, if it had been done in the show to do actual like educational stuff in Hey Ernest Ernest, where
Right.
he delivers information through those characters, that would have been just potentially a riot. That would have been great.
Oh yeah, one of my favorite lines in the whole film
Mhm.
is when he's doing that bit and he's in the character and he's doing the lumberjack.
Yes.
And he's like, ain't no trees in Botswana.
I
I know
wrote that the
I
Botswana
am a
lumberjack.
Botswanian lumberjack and I
Lumberjack.
never had a job.
Yes.
Just that's hilarious.
That was my favorite joke out of that entire scene, actually. Yes.
Oh, 100%. Because I mean, number one, the voice is funny
Yes.
that he's doing,
Uh-huh.
but also the idea of a guy who is a lumberjack,
Yep.
and in a place that has no trees.
No, it's a solid joke. I liked it. But yeah, he's. I wanted to go back. Honestly, I didn't hit rewind and count how many characters Jim Varney is doing in that scene.
Well, because he does some in the later scene in the troll fight that he doesn't do.
That's true.
In,
Yeah.
in the Ottoman Empire.
That's
He
true.
also does some in the Ottoman Empire scene that he doesn't do
Yes.
in the later scene as well.
but-
But it's really just those two scenes. And I actually thought there were more of them.
You're right. It is just the two. I could be wrong. I'm pretty confident he does at least 8 in that first scene.
Yeah, because I mean, obviously there's Auntie Nelda,
Yes.
there's the
hairspray
lumberjack, there's the hairspray lady,
There's
an English gentleman.
There's kind of the Roman armor guy who introduces the entire plot.
Right.
There is the Ottoman Turk himself who is uncomfortably colored.
Yeah, it's true.
There is there's like a World War I fighter jet guy, like with a scarf and everything.
Yeah.
The gear. He's in there briefly.
I
And
mean, that's at least 7.
that's at least 7.
Yeah.
I feel like that we're still missing 1 or 2 more. I mean, like I took my eyes off the screen and I heard a different voice at one point for a character who hadn't appeared so far.
Right.
And like you said, there are a couple more that show up later. So he's showing his versatility here. Even if it's fairly absurdist, it's funny.
Oh, yeah. Again, very little of this film is played straight.
Yeah.
It-
But
it
no,
is-
in what I'm saying, absurd, like that's leaning out of the any reality of this at all. Like we're not even going to pretend that Ernest is changing clothes. We're not going to even acknowledge how this is happening. Like
he's just
switching for
all of a
something.
sudden a
really-
completely different person in completely different outfit. Yeah. I almost wish that they hadn't drawn attention to it.
Yeah.
That they had. I really honestly could have done without the mention of multiple personalities. I think it actually would have played better had they not mentioned that he was switching.
Yeah.
If you can have Kenny react, that's fine, but I don't think it needs to be addressed verbally.
Yeah. But no, again, it shows Jim Varney's range.
100%, which, admittedly is why we're watching these films.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a reason why and not to put down his efforts, but what was the name of it? Master of Disguise, the Dana Carvey movie.
The Dana
Where he did
Carvey.
multiple
Yeah.
roles. It's like, that didn't. Dana Carvey also a talented man.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
But it just didn't work nearly as well. At least I don't know. I know some people that love that movie, and I'm just like, really? Because it's not very good. So was there anything else in particular that you wanted to mention before we move into other segments?
Not really. Two minor things. One, and you may have planned to do this anyway. I think we should acknowledge we have Bobby has a different brother this time.
Oh yes, I did forget to mention this. Mostly because Tom doesn't really stick out.
Yeah.
I mean, he does. I mean, here's the thing. He's similar to Gaylord Sartain.
Yeah.
You know, he does kind of like a shifty salesman kind of thing, which is kind of similar-ish to like the cook
Yeah.
that Gaylord Sartain did in
he
Ernest
does
Goes to Camp.
possibly because of the role he's playing here. He does have a certain more, like you say, shifty con man energy to him this time around.
Right. I was about to say it's more shifty than
Yeah.
Chuck ever did.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
And yeah, there's not really all that much that's funny.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's the bit where, you know, Bobby is, you know, trying to plaster up a new sign on a billboard, and he looks, because he's up on a billboard, he looks over at Tom, and Tom like motions to his rope like, I got you. All I wrote down is that rope is only tied to Tom, who's on the ground. I understand why Bobby is worried.
Yeah.
Because then Tom decides, okay, it's time to go, and he pulls Bobby down. That was the one thing that I was like, that's kind of funny.
Yeah.
It's slapsticky. It's not, you know, 100% great joke,
Yeah.
but it was kind of funny. But that was really, honestly, you know, the one thing that was to me the best part of any of their bits.
What?
Was when they were doing the whole, because everybody else is treating Ernest like he's a nuisance, but wouldn't you know it, Tom and Bobby have troll eradication equipment just for Ernest to buy.
Yeah.
So they're loading him down with all of this stuff, and when Tom goes to quote the price, he's like, it's 1,000 blah 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 blah, and then Bobby looks at him and he goes, plus tax. Just that one line, plus tax, and the way that he delivers it, and then of course Tom, plus tax. I'm just like, that was fun.
Yeah,
that was a fun interaction between the two of them.
And
that's
like
Bobby, that's Bill Burge.
Yes, like you say, it is a nice touch that they actually weirdly do have anti-troll things in stock, as opposed to just like selling things they have on the shelves to
and calling it. Yeah.
No, they have like an anti-troll like record album, like troll love songs or something.
Yeah. Again, playing into the comical B movie sense.
Yeah.
Of this film, it's a little absurd.
Yeah, I'll say one thing. When we talked earlier about like apparently the opening scene is in 1891 when it first revealed at the end, and I'd forgotten the bit that old lady Hackmore like was there at the beginning, like she was alive. These are her like actual siblings. I think it was. I remembered that plot point when she's like moving her own like little wooden dolls to take them down there.
Right.
And it bothered me at first because it made me wonder. It's like, how old is is Eartha Kitt? How old is Hackmore in this scene?
Yeah.
Like, I defended earlier her being 110. But what rubbed me wrong was that scene does not read 1891 to me. That is like 17th century America.
Yeah, no, it reads older than it probably should.
Yeah, so it left me wondering at first. It's like, is Lady Hackmore supposed to be like 300 years old? Like it's because I'm not buying that. I like I said, I will again defend that she is 110, but I am not going to defend that this woman is like 3 centuries old, and has been hanging around. And let me grab something real quick. Let me see if I can find it.
It almost feels like they filmed that scene and then decided, oh, we want Eartha Kitt to be the same character as this little girl.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
It feels like it was a late decision.
Yep.
Because like you said, it doesn't read as, that time period at all. It feels like, puritanical. I mean, I will say though, the mere fact that an African-American family was living in a town full of white people. Yeah. I mean, honestly, that would have still been progressive for 1891, but it would have been out of the realms of possible. It would have raised some really uncomfortable questions about what their role was there anytime earlier.
The important thing about this film is they're diversifying the cast.
True. Yeah. Yeah, I will say we do get Jackie Welch in this film as Kenny's teacher. Yep, she is the school teacher.
I will also notice too, even though multiple pages on the web, I got my case here.
Yeah.
Because buddy of mine, Tim, found this for $1 recently and gave it to me.
Nice.
Knowing I could watch it for the podcast here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even though multiple websites say it's 1891, back of this case says a 200-year-old curse. Yeah,
So again,
not by
how the hell old is Eartha Kitt supposed to be?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, I my first note listed was when I started watching this last night. Yesterday, whenever it was.
Yeah.
It looked all wrong on my screen. I had to, because my TV is new, I had to go through to determine how do I change the ratio settings, the aspect ratio on this new TV. And it appeared to be 4:3 for this movie. And I thought that was interesting that this movie made in 1991 was in a 4:3 ratio. Turns out, no. I apparently have a full screen edition of Ernest Scared Stupid. Let's say it on the front of this case. But if you look on the back down there, it is full screen. So
yeah.
Well,
I mean, honestly, that's the way. I remember when widescreen became the thing, and I was the one person out of the people that I was watching it with that ever wanted to. In fact, when I would buy widescreen editions, they would complain because they'd be like, "I don't like the bars at the bottom of the top," and I was like, "Yeah, but you lose half the picture." When it's in full screen.
Yep.
And they're like, really? I didn't know that. And I'm like, yeah. Would you rather have bars or would you rather see everything?
Yeah. And to be honest, most people finally came around on that when they just changed the shape of TVs. So
yeah, exactly.
But no, somewhere I actually have some old formatted with the black bars VHS tapes because there were very few widescreen VHS formats made. But yeah, this clearly means I missed a chunk of Ernest Scared Stupid, at least on the sides.
Yeah.
Wow. Probably didn't miss very much, I'm guessing. Yeah.
All right. I will say one last thing that I completely forgot to mention is that at the end of the film, not only are all the kids that Trantor, transformed in 1991, revived. But so are all of the kids that he got in the 1800s or whenever it was.
Yes.
And I just wrote down, that's going to be huge culture shock for these kids. Yeah. I'm like, is Eartha Kitt taking them all in? And also, I'm wondering what the relationship was or will be with those white kids. Because she was like, oh, sister, Tommy. Oh, and you children as well. Yeah. I'm just like, ooh, what was? I mean, again, even in the 1800s, or in the 1800s at that time, would have been some interesting relations.
Maybe one or both of them were the children of the Reverend Phineas Worrell. They are Ernest's great uncle, great aunt. Yes.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah. He might have to reshape some of their ideals.
Yeah, that could be the next Ernest movie. Ernest Worrell having to rehome his
Ernest fights racism with children.
He's having to acculturate his time displaced ancestors.
Yeah.
Into the 20th century, the late 20th century.
Yeah.
But no, it's like you ever watched the 4400 on USA some years ago? There was a remake.
I heard of it, but I never saw it.
Yeah, it was aliens had abducted people throughout.
Okay, yeah.
Over the course of the 20th century, and then brought them all back at once. So
wow.
So different people are having to acculturate to like the year 2005.
Sure.
Some of them only left like 10 years ago. Some of them were abducted in like the 1940s. So this is a very different world for them. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
That sort of thing.
All right. Well, then let us go ahead and let us move forward into our first segment, which is the moment. These are, of course, the moments or scenes that were either our favorite or the most interesting to us. So, Loren, what was your moment?
Favorite, most memorable. I mean, the most memorable is I probably have to go with, where'd he go, Rimshot? Where'd he go? Just because, we named the dog Rimshot.
Where did he go?
largely because of that line, probably.
Yeah.
But no, most memorable on the whole. It's funny that this film actually does have, comedic moments and
Mhm.
slightly more scary moments, and it's tempting to pick a scary moment here,
Sure.
because it's at least tonally different for this film. And I'm gonna, again, having not seen any of the films we're going to be getting to next, I'm gonna go out on a limb and assume none of them are even vaguely horror films.
Probably not.
Probably not. At least not Ernest Goes to Africa is not intentionally a horror film.
Oof.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll cheat here and pick one of each.
Okay.
So the scary one I mentioned earlier, where that first kid, who I'm certain had a name. I think you might have said it was Joey.
Joey.
I did not even register that he was given a name in the film.
Yeah, no, I mean, like I said, he's barely in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
he does help them build the treehouse, but then he's gone.
Yes, he does. Yeah, he's introduced to the plot basically to do that.
Yeah, Joey played by Alec Clapper, by the way.
Okay. But yeah, the way Trantor deceives him and the way Trantor deceives Elizabeth, both those are, in my opinion, a solid little B movie, kiddie moments there. They're executed well. With the the tension is built up, and then you think there's a moment where everything's okay, and then it's not. The kids are gonna die. Not really. Yeah. And yeah, on the more comedic side, we were just talking about it, but Ernest playing all the characters, talking about the Botswanian invasion of the Ottoman Empire. I can't quote all that, but here's after the previous films and what we've had to say about Ernest doing different characters, I was coming into this kind of dreading Ernest just doing Varney doing his multiple character shtick.
Sure.
And thought like, this is going to be out of place. I'm not going to like this. And no, like we were just discussing, it works. It's like,
yeah, I don't like the way that they deal with it, but him doing it is solid.
Yeah, I mean, you cut a line later somewhere, that's fine. That's no big deal.
Yeah,
but the actual scene itself of him going through those characters, no, there's a reason why that was fun the first time. It's enjoyable, and I'll have to wait and see if we get any of that in the future films.
All right. So for me, I will say I was very close actually to picking the same.
Yep.
For honestly, the longest time, I was like the Botswana scene or even the troll fight scene when he's doing all those characters.
The end fight scene. Okay.
Yeah. No, again, I liked that troll truck fight, but it was so ridiculous that I was just like, I got taken out of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, the character bits are great. But when I got to this scene, I immediately was like, nope, that's it. And I don't really even remember having as big a reaction to this scene as I was when I was a child as I did watching it this time.
That little girl and her mother.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the one. No, that's it. Honestly, if I had a worst scene, that would probably be it. But the one that just got me, I literally laughed out loud when it happened. When all of a sudden Ernest decides to pivot and he's like, "Come here," and the troll runs. And they do that little dance, and there are bits where it's like kind of slow-mo-ish, and you can see the troll like shaking his head, almost like he's into it. And then Ernest, like that whole bit, I don't even remember laughing at that as a kid.
Yeah.
But last night when I watched that, it just hit me so like just the randomness of it and the visual of it to me was just perfect.
Yeah.
It was brilliant. I found it absolutely hilarious.
And it builds to a literal
Yeah. I mean, I will say he doesn't do that in all of the movies.
No.
So, it is nice to see it in the films. But yeah, that scene got me. So I was
No,
like, yeah,
it,
that's my moment.
it's well done.
Yeah,
The
agreed.
music cue that comes in for it all, it's you know, I was saying earlier how like I might wish that some of the end could have been, you know, less lapsy for a minute before it goes to the top, but
Sure. Yeah.
that bit that pays it off perfectly.
It's solid.
It's solid.
100%. All right. So now let's move on to the Neldy Award, which of course does go to the character in the film that you know was your favorite or either, you know, most interesting. And I'm gonna let you go first, but I'm just gonna say I've had a hard time with this because,
Yeah.
in my opinion, there's really only outside of Ernest again. There's really only 3 characters you could give this to.
Well,
And it's really just depending on, you know, what struck you or what you. So it might depend on what you don't say.
You're trying to choose between Joey and Matt and Mike Murdoch.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And the
Yeah. Oh,
problem is you don't know which one-
the sheriff was my favorite.
You don't know which one is Matt and which one is Mike, and so that's throwing you off. Yeah. No, I mean the fact that you think there are 3 to choose from means that
I will say I'm probably stretching the definition of a character a little bit.
True.
But I'm gonna let you say, and then I'll.
Trantor's got to count as a character.
Oh, he's one of my 3.
Oh, he's one of your 3. Man, that's sadder than I thought. Okay.
Yeah.
So, then I'll let you get to your 3 here in a second. Nonetheless,
Sure.
I'm glad to get to go first because I did not even bother to make a list here of candidates. I knew who it was going to be, and it is without question Eartha Kitt as Old Lady Hackmore.
Yeah.
Eartha Kitt honestly is operating on such a different level than everyone in this film.
Yeah.
That I wouldn't even consider giving it to anyone else. I wish there was more Eartha Kitt in this film. Because she just kills it every time she's on screen. She elevates every scene she's in, even when she's with Ernest. Like somehow she can be in a scene with Jim Varney and still have more energy than he does.
Honestly, most of her scenes are with him.
Yes.
But they're so good. I wish we had more.
Yes. No, absolutely. And like I said, I might have mentioned this earlier.
The gag with the giant can opener.
Oh yeah, that's cute. Yes, exactly.
I mean, just the fact that she has a giant can opener is great.
Yeah. You know, incidentally, this might have been actually as a child my introduction to Eartha Kitt.
Oh, it was for me. 100%.
It probably was. I'm not sure what else I would have known her from, at least as of 91. Because
the only other thing I knew her from around this same time is I knew that she was one of the cat women in Adam West Batman.
And see, I'm not sure when I learned that she was one of the cat women.
Okay.
Or even if I knew her name at some point, like I think I knew Julie Newmar as a Catwoman. I think because was she in the movie?
No, that was Lee Merriweather. That was the only time Lee Merriweather played Catwoman was in the movie because Julie Newmar wasn't available.
Wasn't available for that. Yeah. All right. So I have a feeling I only learned about Eartha Kitt's Catwoman later because she did have a slightly different costume, even a little bit.
Yeah, it was a different costume, different look, different. I mean, different. Honestly, she was super sexy. I mean, honestly, so was Julie Newmar, but in more of like a cat way. Whereas you know, Eartha Kitt was like, I'm sexy and you can't have me.
I will say, okay, this was also a decade before Emperor's New Groove, so obviously didn't know her then. I probably did not know Eartha Kitt's name at this point for this, but I would have known Santa Baby by this point. I'm certain.
Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah. So I just wouldn't have associated. Oh yes, Santa Baby is sung by the creepy old lady.
Right.
Old Lady Hackmore. But no, she's fantastic in this film. It was, you know, who knows? Maybe they used up all their called in all their favors to get Eartha Kitt on this film.
Yeah, honestly, my biggest question is, how did they get Eartha Kitt?
Well, I mean, to be honest, it's not like circa 91 she was a huge star. She's not an
True,
A-list. She's not
but
headlining films.
still, it's not what you would expect. But
No.
yeah, I mean, I will say for me, yes, Eartha Kitt is the clear front runner. In fact, I just assumed that we were both going to come in here and I was just going to be like, it's Eartha Kitt, right?
Yeah.
It's Eartha Kitt.
This is why I was glad I got to go first, is that I don't have to cut names. You name Eartha Kitt, then I have to name someone else. Yeah.
Right. But like I said, when I was watching, I was expecting others to at least be like, they were decent. They're not going to earn the Neldy Award, but they were decent. I had forgotten how unlikable all of the other characters in this film are. Or I guess I just never really realized. But no, my three were Eartha Kitt, the front runner, Trantor, and Rimshot.
Oh, really? I was almost. This is why I stopped.
Honestly, I thought there was a chance that you might choose Rimshot.
No, that's fair. But yes, that's a fair guess. No, a second ago when I stopped myself from predicting, I was going to predict those were your three. Once you said Trantor was one of the three,
Who are the other options?
I thought you might name Kinney, to be honest. Not that he was in. Here's the thing. I thought not in contention of who was going to win. I thought you were. I thought the joke you were making was there are only three characters people even like giving performances to consider in this.
No, to me, for me to pick another child actor, they would have to be on par with Harmony Star.
Sure.
Nowhere close.
Yeah.
Nowhere close.
No.
I mean, again, not bad.
Yeah.
Does a fine job, but I do think that the film leans a little bit too much on him. And, that kind of brings out the fact that he's kind of boring.
He's kind of boring. I will say that given as someone who has no IMDb presence, and as far as I can tell, I'm not sure did another film. He does a serviceable job.
He's not bad.
No.
He just, is in a lot of this film. And I wish not as much had been put on his shoulders.
Yeah.
Not his fault.
No.
At all. But yeah, no. I mean, I think
he worked with what he was given. He did the assignment.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I think I am ultimately going to say it's Eartha Kitt because how can you not? But I do want to give a shout out to Trantor because that creature design is amazing. Do I wish the mouth could have moved a little better? Sure. But honestly,
it's movie charm to some extent that it doesn't.
Oh, yeah, sure. I'm shocked because I've heard other people talk about this film before, and very few of them bring up how good the design of the in fact, I've heard some people say, "Oh, it looks awful," and I'm like, "What movie are you watching?"
Yeah.
I mean, especially for early 90s, it's a really good character design.
Good. I will confess, I don't care for the Big Boss version of Trantor all that much because it
sure.
Between the transformation when he finally comes out, it feels like this is less of an elevated, powerful Trantor and more like, okay, we just slap some extra stuff on top of the existing costume.
It feels like Super Shredder.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Well, and then Super Shredder is at least like 10 feet tall or something.
Bigger.
This Trantor feels about the same size, just with like nails and a few
longer nails and bigger wiggly bits.
And the wig that doesn't intimidate me in the right way.
In fact, it's like, oh, this is kind of when you see the nails grow, it's like, it's kind of intimidating. Then you see the wiggly bits come out, and you're like, okay, that's just funny.
Yeah, the nails, good. Horns, yeah, that's good. Teeth, all this is intimidating. Squiggly little bits coming out of his head.
It's like, okay, now I remember what film we're watching. Now I remember.
Ernest goes hentai.
Oh, geez. Okay, so yes. Inarguably, and I do want to give a shout out also to Rimshot because this is, I think, the film in which he has the biggest presence. Yeah. And as far as I know, it's the last time that we get Rimshot in any of the Ernest films.
That's a bummer. All right.
I might be wrong. I mean, I would imagine that they probably, if they did bring him back, wouldn't be using the same dog.
Yeah.
Because I know that he's not in Ernest Rides Again. So, much after that, he would have at the very least been an older dog.
Sure.
But yeah, so
Could have just stayed wooden, and they just had like the wooden rim shot show up in every future film.
I wouldn't be surprised if maybe it's in the background.
You should be in the background
or something.
somewhere.
But yeah, so it is time now then to ask the big question. The question so important that Ernest himself never stopped asking it. So, Loren, my question to you, when it comes to Ernest Scared Stupid, do you or do you not know what he means, Vern?
So I went into this, kind of hoping that this would, live up to a little more of its than its reputation.
Sure.
Because as the film that I remember enjoying back in the 90s more than Hocus Pocus, coming out of this thing is like this deserves to have the nostalgia reputation that Hocus Pocus does.
Sure.
And I can't say that, to be honest. Like I really can't say this deserves like
I get the detractors.
yeah, I can understand why
do.
this doesn't have a millennial following.
Sure.
But at the same time, I do see what I enjoyed about it the first time. I do see what they were going for. I think it could have been better in numerous ways we've discussed.
Yeah.
But I still had a good time. And I wouldn't mind seeing it again at some point in the future, like with my nieces or something. So yeah, it was fun. And if only because this might be the last time I get to say it. Yeah, I know what he means.
I agree. I would say I was definitely higher on this film as a kid.
Yeah.
And now, like I said, I wish it was a little bit more cohesive, but I think there's some good, solid bits in this. And do I ultimately have fun with this film? Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Do I still think that it could be a Halloween classic for, a cult Halloween classic? Absolutely. I do. Now, would I ever tell anyone like I would have, in the past, oh, it's better than Hocus Pocus? Maybe not.
Yeah.
I do think there are definitely some things about this that I prefer to Hocus Pocus. But obviously
significantly less Eartha Kitt. Yes,
it's true. That actually is a very good argument. You could also argue though that this has 100% less Bette Midler.
True, you are right.
But
imagine if Bette Midler had been playing the mother in that mother and daughter scene that you hate so much. It's
completely transformed. Best scene in the film now. But yeah, no, like I said, there are some edges to it. There, it's a little sloppy, but I still enjoy it. It is a fun watch.
It's in and out like 90 minutes too. It's
true.
Quick.
It's quick.
Yeah.
It is not a long film.
No.
And so yeah, I do appreciate it for that. But yeah, like I said, not as solid as I remember it as a kid, but still a great watch. I definitely know what he means. All right. Well, then now is the time when we let people know how they can get in contact with us. So you can contact us on Twitter and Instagram at the Flying Cow, at the Flying Cow Pod on Twitter and Instagram. You can also email me at theflyingcowpod@gmail.com. There's our Facebook group. Check out all of our other podcasts. And you're already on the Patreon, so thank you for that. Patreon.com/theflyingcow. Loren, anything you want people to know about?
You can find me on Twitter at Loren Collins. I'm on Instagram and TikTok, but hardly ever post there, so that doesn't matter. And if you happen to be listening to this and live in the Atlanta area, I will be in Guys and Dolls at Players Guild at Sugar Hill in April. So check it out.
Are you ensemble or you?
No, I am playing Arvide Abernathy, the grandfather in the show.
Oh, fun!
Yes. I get to sing "More I Cannot Wish You," which I personally know the most from having been a song that's in the Flash Supergirl musical episode.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, in that episode, it's sung by Victor Garber and Jesse L. Martin. Oh, and John Barrowman. John Barrowman sings it too.
Okay. Okay. Fun. Yeah. Fun stuff. All right. Well, again, thanks to all of you guys for listening and or watching. We look forward to, the next episode. I will say, like I said, next episode we will be reviewing Ernest Rides Again, which is actually the last Ernest film that I have seen. So in the next episode, I will have a history with this film. Loren will not, but it will be the last one. So,
well, and speaking of that, Ernest Rides Again, it is free on YouTube with ads.
Oh, well, there you go.
So yeah, it might be on Tubi or some of the other.
I was going to say it's probably on one of those as well.
It's on one of those,
yeah,
but
so
at the very least, it's still currently on YouTube, with ad breaks. So
yeah. All right. Well, again, thank you guys for watching. We will see you next time for Ernest Rides Again. But until that time, moo. Know what I mean?